Well, greetings. Thank you for choosing to spend the next hour or so of your time with me. My name is Richard Pearce, for those of you who may not have yet met me or experienced any of our other training, and I'm looking forward to giving you this presentation today on a very simple process of how to plan your website. This really is a live webinar. It's a Saturday morning here in Sydney, and the challenges of a live webinar sometimes are that things go wrong. If that should happen, please make a note of my Twitter handle at JoomlaGuy, and if the technology happens to fall over, I'll send a tweet out and we'll talk about how to get set up again. Usually though, the internet connection at this end is pretty stable, and I'm sure that everything will work out pretty well. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes for others to join us, for anyone who might be running a little bit late. And I'll start off by just giving you a little bit of background about me, if in fact you don't know much about me, as this might give you a bit more of an insight as to who I am, where I've come from. Before doing that, because I'm just ever so slightly unsure whether this technology is all working, maybe someone who's familiar with the GoToWebinar software could just type in the chat there that you can hear me okay. Otherwise, you're going to hear an hour and a half of nothing. Lovely, thank you. That's all going well. Excellent. Well, let me give you a bit of my background. As I said, I've been in business for myself since 1995, so on the web a bit longer than some, not as long as others. And I started off working in a retail store, and I was selling Sony equipment here in Australia, and that was great for an early 20s male getting to play with gadgets all the time. And after a while, the owners came to me because they knew that I was a bit of an internet geek, and they said, hey, we're a technology company. We think this internet thing is going to be huge. Can you build us a website? Yeah, of course I can, I said. So I went away and worked out how to build a website. There was nothing available when I started. There was no real training. There were no books. And the only information was what I could discover online, which right in those very early days, I didn't even have a web browser. You could access the web via a text interface. And after a lot of trial and error, I discovered that it was in fact possible to build a website. And so we built one of the first retail websites in Sydney. And in fact, well before Sony or any other of the major manufacturers had sites. It was pretty ordinary when I look at it now, but at the time it was great. And I discovered, quite by accident, the adage that we say now, that content is king, meaning that if you have a lot of good quality content, people will come to your site and return and tell others about it. But I did discover that by accident, and what had happened was we were getting lots of the same sorts of questions all the time, so I figured, well, wouldn't it be a good idea to answer some of those questions on the website? And so that's what I did. I wrote some articles, and I still remember the one that was the most popular. It was an article with photos on how to copy from your camcorder to your computer, which these days we take for granted. It's pretty easy. You take the memory stick out or connect a USB cable and off you go. But back then it was kind of tricky. And so word spread, people came to the site and they sent emails. I thought it would be a good idea to answer those emails. This stuff's not real hard, is it? And even though a lot of them came from various countries where I figured we wouldn't make any money out of them, it would just be nice to make a friend. And so I did that, and again the word spread, and we started getting inquiries from around the country, from around the world, to supply equipment, and so I did that. All by email. I had no e-commerce store in those days. And that's how I started, and after a while I thought, well, this is a lot more fun, and I can see a better future for me than working in a shop. And so I then eventually took the plunge and went full-time. And over that time I built stacks of websites. Some of them were enjoyable projects, some of them were not. And there always seemed to be a common problem. There was a huge difference between the perceived amount of work involved in the project and the actual amount of work. Now, if you're a web developer, you know what I'm talking about, or if you've been involved in any sort of project planning in the past, because this seems to be the nature of the course, but does it have to be? It started to become a bit of a bugbear for me, and I would always ask myself the question, what went wrong? Why was this a pain? Why did I lose money on this job? How could this have been done better? And, okay, this might be simplifying it a little bit, but it invariably came back to one thing: bad planning. Bad planning from the start, the execution was usually not a problem, but people change their mind throughout the project, and some of those things you can't overcome, but more often than not, the biggest thing was bad planning. And so that's what I'm hoping to overcome today. And so let's talk about today and who this is for. I'm aiming this for anyone who might be building a new website or who already has a website and are looking to get it rebuilt. It could also be curious for any web developers who just want to have a look at my process. And the reason that I'm doing this is that although some of you have been kind enough to say, hey, I love your Joomla training, I've got this sneaking suspicion that although that's quite good and will give you the basics of Joomla, you might be left still scratching your head and asking, okay, that's great, but where do I begin? And so today I'm hoping that if you're in that situation, I take you from where do I begin to now I can begin. Okay, so the topics that we're going to cover are, first of all, goals, market research, and then planning your content. And you know what? That's it. This stuff ain't that hard. It's just getting a few things in place. However, even though they're just the planning stages, there are a few other things that I'd like to give you some tips on in the production stage. First of all, there are 3 ways that you can get your site built. I'm also going to give you a tour of our advanced training courses, and then we'll move on to question time. Now, you won't learn everything today. I've deliberately kept this fairly short. I'm trying to find a format that I think works for most people. I've been on some webinars that go for hours that I find are just too much. This one will be somewhat shorter than that. You might not also learn everything for your situation. The process itself is actually pretty simple, pretty logical, and perhaps for some of you there's nothing new. For others though, I hope that it's going to help to just get these ideas that are probably in your head now out in front of you. The process itself works for all sorts of sites, whether it's a personal website, a non-profit site, clubs, schools, e-commerce sites, business sites, even enterprise sites. So the format today will be around about 45 minutes of teaching, and then we'll go into question time. Now, there have been loads of questions, and so I'm not going to be able to accept any new questions today because it's going to take a long time to go through the questions that were sent in by those who added a question at registration. Please feel free, if your question either doesn't get answered, or if you have a follow-up question, or you didn't ask a question but now you'd like to go to our forum at www.buildajoomlawebsite.com/forum. Now, I am recording this webinar today. When I last did this, I didn't have a lot of luck with the recordings, so I'm not going to make any promises, but if it all works out, I'll try to get this published on YouTube later today for those who might want to watch it again or perhaps tell their friends about it. Right, now we're going to go into step 1, which is setting your goals and actions. The first step when planning a website is to set a goal. Now, I know that should be obvious, right? But the goal needs to be defined, as it helps when you get to the stage when you're developing your content. You see, when you have a clear goal, when you're developing your content, if you're not sure whether to put a particular piece of content on your site or even where to begin, all you have to do is ask, well, will this help achieve the goal? Will this bit of content that you're creating get you towards your goal? This will make a bit more sense, I think, if we go through some examples. So the first of those is that you might have a goal to get leads. And this is often the case if you have a service type of business, say home roof restoration, car detailing, something like that. Or perhaps you're wanting to get sales. That's usually the case if you have a product-orientated business. The best example of that, of course, is an e-commerce site. Non-profits are looking to get donations. If you're a club, you're hoping to get new members. A big part of running a club is also retaining members. Now this next one might sound a little strange. It might though be quite possible that you have a goal to get fewer phone calls. Now usually in business, you're wanting the phone to ring off the hook of course, but perhaps not all the time. A good example of this I can think of is a real estate agent who might be currently taking up a lot of their time answering the same sorts of questions of tenants. and so they may wish to get fewer phone calls and push tenants instead to a self-help section of their website. Or it could be a goal to save money on printing costs. This is often a goal for manufacturers. Over the years I did a couple of manufacturing websites, and one in particular comes to mind who told me that they spent literally tens of thousands of dollars a year printing and distributing brochures. Or perhaps you're looking to earn money from advertising, and the examples there would be a news or a blog site. And good luck with that one. Unless you've got a very big budget, it's a really tough model. That more often than not is perhaps one goal rather than the overriding goal. And so that comes on to the last point, where I need to point out that it is, of course, quite possible to have more than one goal. Generally speaking, though, there is one thing that overrides all the others. Once you've defined your goal, it's time to take this a bit further and define an action. A goal on its own is helpful, but you also need to ask yourself, what do you want a visitor to do when they arrive at your website? And I heard this expressed quite nicely, what is the most wanted response? Or you might like to think of this more simply as a conversion. So ask yourself, what do you want a visitor to do when they arrive on your website? How about we go through those goal examples again and then translate them to an action? So if your goal is to get leads, perhaps you want visitors when they arrive on your website to pick up the phone or complete an inquiry form. If you want to get sales, you probably want to get people buying from a shopping cart. Now look, I know this might sound obvious, but really you need to define this, and it helps direct your content thinking later. So if you want to get sales, for example, when you get to the content creation stage, you should be asking yourself questions like, well, our action is to get people to buy, so what else can we do to increase sales? Should we add one of those trust logo things, or show better quality product images? Maybe include testimonials. If you're hoping to get donations, well, the action is going to be to encourage visitors to complete a donation form that includes a payment section. Clubs who need to get and retain members may wish to be pointing their visitors to a social aspect of the website, say in the case of Joomla, Jom Social, or a forum, or just simply a membership form. If you're hoping to get fewer phone calls, well, visitors need to find the answers to their questions quickly and easily, perhaps via a knowledge base. Saving money on printing costs, well, that's a pretty easy one. You just need visitors to find the relevant information, which, in the case of a website, is often a much better medium to display information than a brochure. Although in this case, I probably should point out, this action is unlikely to be the only one, because once they find the information, you also want an action point to push visitors to find their local supplier. And finally, if you're looking to earn money from advertising, well, you just want people to click on banners. And so part of the planning process would be to determine where is a good position to place one or more banners on your website. And just like goals, you quite possibly have more than one action. For example, when people arrive at your website, you've got the main action, but you might also encourage them to subscribe to an email newsletter. Now, I'm kind of curious as to who is on this call today. And so I'm going to try and get the technology working and put up a quick poll on the screen at the moment. While I've been reading those, you've probably been thinking to yourself, well, what's my website's major goal? So how about you tell me? I'm just going to put a poll up there. All you need to do is click on the appropriate response there. Perhaps you have more than one. You're able to actually click on more than one. And this will be just really helpful for me to get a bit of a feel as to who I'm talking to. So please go ahead and tick those boxes. I'll give that a few seconds while I take a drink. I'll give that just a few more seconds. Okay, seems as though the answers are pretty much there. So let me go ahead now and close that off. Okay. Now, here are the responses, just for your own interest. About 2/3 of you are interested in a business site, how to get leads and sales. Perhaps 30%, that's more than I expected, are interested in a club. I guess under that banner might also come churches, perhaps. 20% for a news or blog, 30% for non-profit, and 22% other. And of course, that doesn't add up to 100%, but you could check on multiple boxes there. That's why. Fantastic. Thank you for doing that. So step one is goals and actions. We're now going to move on to step two, which is market research. Now, market research is a very broad term, and we could spend a whole day doing a session on this, but in the time that I've allowed, let's just go through some quick hints on how to look at your competitors. And the first thing is that you go to your favorite search engine, in other words, Google, and type in the typical keywords that you would enter to find your own site. And that will, of course, come up with a bunch of results. And so the first thing is just to look through those competing sites. Now, I'm conscious that the word competitors is a word that is typically used in a business sense, but the same principle does apply for other sites as well. So, for example, if you're looking to build a site for a church, well, you wouldn't see other churches as your competitors, or actually maybe you would, but the same principles apply. If you've got a personal site as well, just go and look at other personal sites. So there's a couple of things that you can do to determine why those sites are the leaders for those keywords. And you do that, first of all, just by your own intuition. Go to the sites, look at them, go through a bunch of pages and ask yourself, why are they getting the top results in the search engines? It might be obvious. They might be leading organisations in your particular industry, or it might not be so obvious. And so go through the pages and also ask yourself, are they doing a good job in directing visitors to a particular goal and action? There's also a somewhat less obvious thing that you can do. Now, I was only going to touch on this, but I'm going to talk about a piece of software that I use. I would only normally mention this in passing, but they do happen to, coincidentally, no word of a lie, I only found out about this a couple of days ago. They do have a special on it, and so I want to talk to you about this a little bit quickly here. There's a piece of software you may have heard me talk about, or you might even be familiar with, called Market Samurai. It's a research tool predominantly. It has a number of functions. The major two functions, well, there's three actually, major three functions I use are the keyword research feature. That's free. There's also a thing called SEO competition, and that's the one I really want to talk about. There's also a rank tracking feature, which is kind of nice if you want to see where your site is appearing in the search engines. But the SEO competition part is quite helpful to use at this stage, because what you can do with this is enter some keywords and it will show you the top sites for those keywords and why they're the top sites. Now, I don't want to go into a whole SEO lesson here, but basically a site will rank high in the search engines based on broadly two things: the number of links pointing to that site and the quality of links pointing to that site. Now, if you understand SEO, forgive me, that is a very simple explanation, but it's the easiest way to explain it to beginners. The quality and quantity of links pointing to a site. Market Samurai can quite easily show you that and therefore give you a bit of an indication as to the likelihood of you being able to compete for those keywords. Now, there's lots of ways that you can get people to a website. Search engine rankings is only one of them, but it's a very nice one if you can crack it. And so I wanted to mention this piece of software because it is currently half price, and my recommendation to you is this. When the webinar's finished, maybe digest what we've learned here, and then I'm going to give you a link where you can go and try the software out. You must use that link to get this special half price offer, because it's actually being sold on a third-party website at the moment, not their own website. So if you buy it from them, you'll pay $150 is the normal price. $75 if you buy through the link that I'm going to give you. And full disclosure, that link is my affiliate link. If you do choose to go and buy it, if you decide that's a nice tool for you, I'll make a few bucks. Thank you. Quite legitimately though, this is a piece of software I do use all the time, at least once a week, if not more. But I don't want that to become a distraction. That's not quite the purpose of today's presentation. but might be something of interest, and I mention it because of the time-sensitive offer. By the way, it ends next Friday, so you've got plenty of time over the weekend to try it out and decide whether or not you think that that would be a useful tool for you. All right, let's move on. So we're talking about the top things that you like and dislike on those competing sites. And you want to make a note of at least 3 things on each site that you like and 3 things you dislike. If those competing websites have a blog or perhaps back issues of email newsletters, have a read of them. Now, if there's a blog, that can be a particularly useful thing to have a look at, because blogs quite often have comments on them, and by reading those comments you can get a bit of a feel for whether or not people are happy with the company. You might even learn things about your particular industry, and you can also get a feel for how often those competitors are writing to their audience. Of course, if they don't have a blog or if they have some sort of social platform like Facebook or Twitter, or possibly even YouTube, then you want to have a look at those as well. Because once again, people like to write comments on those sites, and so that's a useful way of finding out what people are interested in. And all of this can help you when it comes time to developing your content. And that's the next step. So step 1, goals and actions. Step 2, market research. Step 3, planning content. Now, I think it's helpful when planning content to make a distinction between the 2 broad types of content that appear on a web page. You may have heard me explain this in other training sessions. I've come up with a term called primary content and secondary content. Here's a, admittedly, small picture of a web page, and you don't need to see the detail, but what I wanted to point out here is that the main part of the page, the primary content, is made up of 1 or more articles. And so you need to plan for what is the main part of the content on each page. But there's also a bunch of other stuff on a typical web page. And so I've coloured the main content, the primary content, green, and the secondary content pink. So the secondary content are things like logos, search boxes, menus, banners, footer texts, perhaps a newsletter box sign up. Usually the primary content is unique on each page, but the secondary content might be the same throughout the entire site or common throughout a number of pages. In fact, one of the reasons why I like using Joomla over another, what will remain unnamed content management system, is that the way of adding secondary content to a Joomla site is really easy. That's generally managed by modules, so you do this in Module Manager. If this is all new to you, please watch our free course, The Basics. And within modules, you can allocate the pages that modules need to appear on. Primary content is managed in Article Manager. So understand the difference between what I'm calling primary and secondary content. Then the next step is to have one big fat brainstorm session. And depending on the size of your organisation, you might want to call in everyone to do that. Of course, if it's you, well, it's just you and the dog. But I would not just leave this stage up to management. I would encourage everyone who has, well, not everyone necessarily, but major people within your organisation to be part of this process. And in the brainstorm session, you want to have a think about every single element that appears on a web page. You might end up with a list something like this. So if we think about our realtor example earlier, let's say they got together and had a brainstorming session and came up with maybe 20 or 30 items that could appear on the website. List them all. You don't need any fancy software to do this. The best tool is a pen and a piece of paper. And I've just got a shorter version here. Let's say that it was decided that it might be a good idea to put a logo on the website, a contact form, a live chat feature, a sales inquiry form, a team members page, for sale pages, for lease, a tenant help page, testimonials, a phone number, let's give away a free house, an about us page, and featured property page. So this is in no particular order, on no pages, one big long list is this step. And then once you've done that, you can filter the list. In this case, this is a decision to be made by, well, decision makers. So probably not everyone now, You've got everyone to give some input, and then the major players in your organisation get together and decide, well, what's the final list, which might look like this. So as part of that session, the decision makers decided that having a live chat feature would be too burdensome for their organisation, and perhaps it wasn't quite the smartest idea to give away a free house. So they get scrapped on the list to come up with the final list. Then you can create what we call a sitemap. Now a sitemap is just a word that means a hierarchical diagram of the pages on your site. So you now take that unordered list and start to put it into some sort of order. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to go back to here. Just because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 items there, that doesn't mean 11 pages. They're just items. Some of those items might go, you might have 2 or 3 of them on one page. So these are just a list of elements. So this sitemap stage is to actually decide the specific pages on your site. There are a couple of guidelines when creating a sitemap that I like to consider. These are guidelines. There's no rules when it comes to this, and it's not going to work for every site. But as a guideline, it's a really good idea to have no more than 8 pages across the top. You don't have to have 8. Just try and keep it less than 8 or less. And the reason for that is that any more, and it starts to get a bit confusing for your site visitor. They might not be sure where they should be going next. If you really do have some major areas that don't fit in there, perhaps they should be going into a separate menu somewhere. So About Us and Contact Us come to mind, for example. They don't need to necessarily be in that top menu. So no more than 8 pages if you can. And when it comes to depth, there's a thing called the 3-click rule. Try to keep your site no more than 3 levels deep, or better still, think of it as when a visitor arrives on the website, they should have to click no more than 3 times to find the content that they're after. That one should be pretty obvious. If you've got to click around everywhere to find stuff, then, well, it's not a very good navigation structure. Once again, this isn't going to work for every website, but that's a good guideline to work towards. Now, when it comes to time to drawing out your sitemap, yes, you can draw some pretty boxes, or just make a list. It doesn't have to be fancy. So here's a simplified example of our realtor from earlier. There's one top level, the home page, and then 4 second levels, for sale, for lease, a tenant help page, I'd probably just call that tenants, about us, and then some sub-pages under a couple of those. Under the tenants page, there's a knowledge base, there's a help form, and under About Us, there might be a separate page where all the team members are listed with their photos. So at this point, you can start fleshing that out a little bit. So the next step I would do is write down every element from the brainstorm that should appear on each of these pages. So on the home page and every other page, you would have a logo. There would be a navigation menu throughout the site. You'd probably want to put your phone number somewhere prominently. And on the home page, perhaps there would be a featured property. Then on the for sale and for lease pages, you would have property listings and an inquiry form link. On the tenant help page, that's where the knowledge base would be with a searchable list of frequently asked questions, as well as a help form. And then the About Us page has team members with their photos and a bio for each one. See how all this is coming together? It's just the process mainly that I'm hoping you're going to find helpful here. Now after this, it can be fleshed out even more. I've got to tell you, this is where your project will potentially fail. This is the part that people overlook. Even though you've got a pretty good sitemap there and a reasonable listing of everything that needs to appear on the sitemap, I really think even for the most basic of sites, you need to do one more thing. And it's at this point that you might want to engage a professional web developer if you've chosen to not go down the do-it-yourself route. It's really, really helpful to create what we call a wireframe. And a wireframe is actually just doing a sketch drawing of each of your pages with each element listed on that page. Now, you don't need to be a graphic artist to do any of this. It's just a sketch. You don't even need to put things in the right spot yet. It's just to ensure that everything has been ticked off. Think of this as the blueprint to your house. When you get a house built, even if it's an off-the-plan type house or what we call here a project home, you would still have some sort of architectural drawings to ensure that everything's stuck into the house. If you don't do this, you might build the house and then find that, well, there was no bathroom. Sorry about that. It might look something like this. Now, the example that I've put up here is perhaps a typical property sales page. So we've got the logo, the bit where I've written site-wide navigation. That was terminology I used to use when I did wireframes. That's basically just the menu, the site-wide menu. There would be a main photo, and perhaps some thumbnails underneath the main photo. Some feature icons for the property, such as 2 bedrooms, 8 garages and 13 bathrooms. And then in the right-hand section of the page, you'd have your inspection times, perhaps an auction date, and some text that may or may not actually be accurately describing the property. The purpose of this is just to ensure that all of the required elements have been considered. And later on in this presentation, I'm going to show you this again to show you how this can correlate to planning your content. Now, that's it. That's the process. There's only 3 steps. Let's go through them again. There's goals and actions, market research, and planning your content. You should now be able to go away and really have a think about what you should be putting on your website, where it should go, creating a good navigational structure. But there's a couple of other hurdles that you might need to go through before you really feel confident to be able to take that step. And so let me go through a couple of those. The homepage in particular needs careful planning. One of the problems with a homepage, or really any page on your website, is a thing that we call the bounce rate. If you use Google Analytics, you might have seen that bounce rate and wondered what it meant. It's simply a percentage of the number of people who go to a page, in this case the homepage, and then go no further. In other words, they bounce out. And that's bad for a couple of reasons. One, first of all, you're not getting your most wanted response. Secondly, Google takes a number of things into consideration when ranking a site, and one of them is in fact the bounce rate. If they see that you click on a link in the search results and then come back pretty quickly and click on another one, well, that site is probably not giving you the result that you're after, and as such might not be such a good site, and so you can get bumped down the rankings. Or vice versa, you're not going to increase your rankings. So you need to pay particular consideration to the homepage. What's a good bounce rate? You'd probably think that you'd want to be getting what, 90, maybe 80% of people clicking through. Oh, sorry, it just doesn't happen. Believe it or not, it's pretty typical to get a 50% or more bounce rate. That is, more than half of the people that hit your homepage don't go any further. Now, that can be for all sorts of reasons, which I won't go into now, but you can certainly reduce it. And so when planning your homepage, you need to think about what is the goal of the homepage. And in most, not all, but in most cases, the goal of the homepage is not to get your most desired action. It's in fact to push people further into the website. Now, a good exception I can think about that would be a service business where you just want people to pick up the phone. So you might actually display your phone number prominently on that homepage, and there might be enough information on the homepage for people to say, oh yeah, right, I'll ring them. But for a lot of websites, most people need more information before they're willing to take action. And so again, the goal of the homepage is to push visitors further into the site. Now there's a couple of ways that you can do that. Well, the phone number one you want displayed prominently. You want to perhaps link to a form, so have a big button that says click here to contact us. You need logical navigation, so if you have an e-commerce site, you might have a list of categories listed down the side on the homepage so people can very quickly see where they need to go, that type of thing. A couple of other considerations. At this point, you might need to consider market segmentation if that's appropriate to your business. What I'm talking about here is the fact that a lot of businesses sell to different types of markets. I'll give you some examples. In my case, I've got a free course for beginners and I've got advanced courses for more experienced people. And so on the homepage, I've got links through our various courses. That's helpful to segment people. So for example, not everyone that comes to the homepage will be a beginner. And so those who want more information can scroll down and find out about our Joomla Pro course, for example. That might be applicable to you as well. You might be selling to different types of markets. Another example might be different types of vertical markets. Let's say you had some sort of medical product that you sell to both doctors and dentists, and perhaps the sales process is different for those different markets. So you would have a "Are you a doctor?" click here button, and or "Are you a dentist?" click here button, and then that's pushing people into the appropriate part of the website. So there's a couple of considerations when planning the home page. Now I'd like to return to the wireframe that I showed you earlier and talk about producing your content. You see, the wireframe is useful for this stage as well. Not only do you create it to show all of the elements that need to appear on a page, but it can be helpful, unless you're a one-man band, it can be helpful to delegate responsibility for creating content. So what I would do is take your wireframe for each page, look at each element, and then delegate tasks to various people in your organization with a deadline. So for example, one person would be told that they have to go and get all the property photos. So on your wireframe, it's a good idea to write Jane Smith tomorrow. Right? So Jane's job is to get all those property photos by tomorrow. Anthony Abrahams needs to write up all the text for the properties by this time next week. Write that down on your wireframe. Make sure you allocate deadlines. Otherwise, it just doesn't happen, I find. Somebody else's job might be to get the staff photos, somebody else's job might be to write the content for the bios for the staff, etc. And if you do that for each of the elements on your wireframe, you will, in theory at least, be well ahead of most people building their websites. And you can potentially have a much smoother process and not run into the same sorts of hurdles that most people do. At this point, you might discover that you've missed something, and that's okay. You haven't started building the website yet. And so it's much easier to fix a problem at this stage where you've just got sketches on paper than it is to have to rebuild the design or navigation or content within the website once it's finished. Worthwhile spending quite a bit of time on this. Now, there are a couple of other considerations that I'm just going to go through. The first is text. A lot of people have difficulty deciding, well, how much or how little text should I write? And there's no easy answer to this. And when you do research about this on the internet, you'll find that there's a very wide range of opinions. Some people are adamant that you can only have short content on a website, that people scan and not read. Well, you know, that's not true, and you would have found this as yourself. There are certain pages where you're quite happy to read and other pages where you do just want to scan. And so here's a broad guideline to consider, particularly when you're starting off. Of course, I'm going to contradict myself a bit here. Once the website's finished, you can always change the content later on. But when you're starting, if you're really stuck, use this as a guideline. On your navigation pages, now what I mean by that, on your home page or on, say, your category page, just have shorter amounts of copy. Copy is just text. So your homepage, you probably do want to just make it easy for people to click on buttons and find the right section. On your detail pages, such as a product page, a property listing page in our example, that's where you can have longer amounts of content. Keep asking yourself that question that I proposed earlier. Will writing this help to achieve our goal? And sometimes the answer to that is, I don't know. And so you're just going to have to experiment and test and try. Do a couple of pages longer text perhaps and a couple shorter. Look at the results over a week and then swap them out later on. Yes, it is a bit of a contradiction in what I said before in that you should plan the site and get it right. But unlike a brochure, a website, you can do that to an extent. There are some image considerations as well. The only comment I'm going to make here is really for business people with a budget. Please consider using a professional photographer. The saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, has never been truer than it is for websites. And so it is well worth the effort getting that done well. So many business sites are let down by poor photos. I'm talking about product photos, staff photos, I don't know, anything else that you really want to include there. One of the questions I remember when I went through was about photos, so I might talk about that a bit more in the photo session. Yeah, everyone thinks that because they've got a digital camera they can take great photos. Well, consider getting good photos. And the last one, I'm tempted not to mention it because it's a bit of a vague comment, but I'll just say this. If your site has some sort of interactive content on it, please plan that well. Sorry, that's about as useful as the comment gets. Let me try and explain what I mean by that. First of all, interactive content. The most basic of that would be, say, a feedback form, but it might be a very detailed form. It might be some sort of custom application. And so the reason I'm mentioning it now is that this is often also where a website would fall down. When you're getting something like that built, whether you're doing it or you're getting a professional to help you, quite often the results can be unexpected. And so when planning that part, I guess the only advice I can really give you is ask lots of what-if questions and ask them with the developer if you're using one. What if somebody clicks on that button instead of this button? Try and break it, in other words. Try and break the functionality and then build it so it's not broken. What if they don't fill that out? Are we asking the right question there? Are we asking too many questions here? Really think it through, and hopefully that will overcome some of the challenges that can come about when you're building something complex. We're pretty close to finishing the formal part of this presentation, but I thought it would be helpful just to clarify the 3 different ways that you can build a website. There's the do-it-yourself way, and in this case, you're basically going to get an off-the-shelf template and build the site yourself. This is pretty much the approach that we teach in our training sessions, although the next option could be viable for you as well. Now, there are pros and cons to each of these. The advantage is that, well, this is cheap. You can buy a really good quality template for, say, $40 or $50, get some affordable hosting, and you're off and running. The downside you do need to think about. You, with this approach, are restricted to a certain extent by the layout of the template. It can take some time to find an appropriate template that will suit your wireframe. And so that can take a little bit of time to find something that you like. This next option is also quite popular. I'm calling that a hybrid option where the designer does some of the work and you do the heavy lifting, such as entering the content, maybe creating the storage setup within Joomla. The advantages are you get the look you want. The big disadvantage is that it takes time to build the site. When you're doing it yourself, you can get a template today and be entering content today. When you use a designer, well, it's going to take at least a couple of weeks toing and froing to get the design right. Or the third option is to get everything completely outsourced. This one's a bit obvious. The pros are you get the expertise of a professional, all your pages look terrific, and you don't have to do the work, or that part of the work anyway. The downside, of course, is the price. It will cost you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to engage a professional, depending on the type of site that you're wanting to build and the type of result that you're willing to put up with. Okay. That indeed does conclude this part of the presentation. I'm going to get to your questions in a moment, and so stick with us as there's quite a wide range of questions, and I think that you'll find that quite informative. Just before I get on to that, I want to give those who are unfamiliar with our other training courses a very quick tour of them and how they might help you further in your journey. So we've got 2 advanced training courses, and this first one, I'm going to tell you about how you can get it for free in just a moment. It's called Beyond the Basics. The free course is The Basics, and that's a completely free, no registration required course, completely free, which it goes through all of the theory of Joomla. And this is called Beyond the Basics because it's to help you take that next step. The first part of this course is really all I wanted to include because this is the most helpful part. The basics you can see as being pretty much theoretical, whereas Beyond the Basics is where we get practical. And the biggest part of this course is a series I built called How to Build a Joomla Site from Scratch. I do a little bit of planning in that as well, and I actually show you how I go through the planning process and build a real website that you can in fact see online right now. There is, however, a couple of other things when you're a beginner that you need to know with a Joomla site, and so they're included in this course as well. One of them is how to back up and restore a Joomla site. I rabbit on about this like no tomorrow because there are horror stories of people who have had websites and lost them because they thought it was being backed up, but it wasn't. So you need to learn how to do that. Please do not trust your web host. There are a lot of fantastic web hosts out there. I'm about to introduce you to one. but you must not rely on even the best host. It's your website, it's your data, you're responsible for keeping that backed up. So we've got some training videos for that. You'll also learn how to create web forms, how to use Google Analytics on a Joomla site, how to add a Google map, a sitemap, and this course will soon have some even more information in there. Now with both this and the next course, you pay once. It's not a subscription. I've found from feedback that people didn't like subscriptions, so instead we just charge a one-off fee, and that gives you a lifetime subscription. And right now it's just $27. When I add the new material in the next couple of weeks, if you join now, you'll get access to that and anything else that should be added in the future. When I do add this new material, the price will be going up to $47. But there is an opportunity today for you to get this for nothing. If you don't yet have a web host, or if the host that you're unhappy with for some reason, then please consider this offer. We have, in conjunction with SiteGround, put together a package where when you buy SiteGround hosting, you get Beyond the Basics for free. Now to do that, you need to use the link on our website on the resources page. That's the only way to get that special, and in the email that will come to you about an hour after this is finished, that includes a link to take up that offer. There's a second course that we have, and I'll quickly run through this one too. It's called Joomla Pro. The first thing to note is that with Joomla Pro, you get everything that's in Beyond the Basics. So you don't buy both. If you want it all, just get Joomla Pro. And it includes every Joomla feature. That's probably half of the course. I go through everything that's included in Joomla. So you'll never be asking yourself, what does that button do? It's all covered in that training. There's a big section that we did earlier this year on the Joomla ACL. This is the most confusing part of newer versions of Joomla. It was something that Joomla community asked for years, literally years. It took 3 years to get it done. Now it's arrived, everyone's saying, oh, I don't understand it. So Joomla ACL does two things. It allows you to restrict who can see certain content on your website if you have that need, as well as who can control certain content. So if you've got a medium-sized organisation, you might have a bunch of people who need to update your website, but you only want to give them control to certain parts of your website. So that's all explained in that section, as well as securing your Joomla site to reduce to minimise the likelihood of it getting hacked, how to install Joomla locally on your own personal computer instead of having to develop at a web host, how to create an awesome blog with a 40% discount to EasyBlog, how to create e-commerce sites, membership sites, and even a section we did late last year on how to become a Joomla developer and build websites for local businesses and make some money. The other feature is that we provide what we call priority support to Joomla Pro members via our forum. One of the things that frustrated me when starting with Joomla, I kind of don't like to say this because obviously I want to support the Joomla project, but I found the Joomla forum could be frustrating at times, and so I've wanted to provide a service where our Joomla Pro members can get their questions answered. We strive hard to have every question that's asked there answered. Anyone can go and look at that in our forum right now, but to write to that forum, you need to be a Joomla Pro member. Now this course is currently $97. It includes everything, and like Beyond the Basics, it's a lifetime subscription. It will be going up also when some more additions are done to that throughout the rest of this year. At that point, it will become $147. So of everything we offer, this is by far the best value, as it includes, well, everything for life as well as support. So please consider, after you finish this webinar, having a look for one of those courses and maybe asking us a question in our forum. Like I said, you'll get an email after this, about in an hour after the recording's finished, with those links. Now I'm going to get into your questions, and if you decide that you don't want to hang around for this part, that's fine. When you close the GoToWebinar software, you'll be shown a short survey. It would be really, really helpful if you could take 30 seconds and just give me the answers to that. I am hoping to do these a little bit more regularly, and one of the things that I'm conscious about in particular is the time. We've been going now for about 50 minutes, and I'd like to know, is that too short? Is that too long? You know, I could have made this 3 hours, and myself would find that a lot, but maybe you would like that. That's the sort of comment that would be really helpful to put into that survey. Feel free to leave at any time, but I think you should hang around because there are some great questions here. Folks, I've got nearly 80. I couldn't believe it. We've had, you know what, I'll give you some figures. Robert, who you might know works with us, he encouraged me to tell you the figures for this webinar today, and I'll do that. I wasn't going to, but on our list, we've got about 19,000 people on our newsletter list. So I promoted this on, I think it was Thursday, Sydney time. Of those 19,000, we got about 400 clicks, and of that we got just over 300 registrations. I thought we'd get 50. So it kind of tells me that this is a topic you want to know more about, which is fantastic. Once again, mention in the survey there if that was the case for you. Right now, we're looking at 106 people on the webinar. That's a little bit of a surprise. I thought we'd get 2/3. From speaking with other people who do lots of webinars, they tell me that you do lose a certain proportion of people who just don't bother to show up. That's not the end of the world. Well, if I can get the recording working, it won't be the end of the world, as they will get an opportunity later to follow up with that. So yeah, there's over 100 here now, and I've got about 80 questions. So I think when we do these we'll do them on a much smaller scale, so I can give longer answers. Now, I am continuing to record, and I will identify you if you've made a question, but only by your first name and country. In the case of one of the questions, I won't identify it at all, as I think it might be a bit too sensitive. Just give me a second while I have a drink. Right, excuse me. So, as I said at the beginning, if you've only just joined us, I won't be taking any live questions today. There's just too many to get through. If you've got a question, or if maybe my response doesn't answer your question fully, then please pop into the forum and ask that there. Try to avoid emailing us if you can. There are only 2 of us that work in this business, and it can get a bit overwhelming at times. The forum also means that members of the community can answer, and so you can get quite often a better response. Okay, I'm going to kick it off here with, you know what, just let me pause my screen for a moment. There we go. With any luck, you should be looking at a blank browser now, because I might jump through to some websites to answer some of these questions. Here we go. These will be pretty quick. So if you're worried that your question will be the last question, don't be. I will try and spend about 30 seconds only on each one. Laura from ES, I'm guessing that's Spain, writes, after Joomla Pro, I need a last impulse to rebuild my former site using Joomla CMS. I hope the seminar will help me. Thank you. Well, thank you. Yes, that's not really a question, but I hope it's been helpful to you. Aaron from the US says, I'm a beginner and would like to know how to upgrade to newer version of Joomla. I need to become more knowledgeable. Well, fair enough. How to upgrade? Well, it depends on which version of Joomla you have. The current version of Joomla, the major version, is 2.5. The current minor version is 0.6, which means we're running at 2.5.6. If you're running anything from 1.6 up, then you can upgrade just pretty easily within the Joomla administrator. Now that I've said that, I'm not quite sure when that update feature was added. It might have been in 1.7, but it is pretty easy to upgrade. If, however, you have a 1.5 site or, oh dear, a version 1 site, then yeah, it's not so easy. And it's well and truly beyond the scope of the time that I've got now to answer that question. Basically, though, if you have a 1.5 site, which theoretically at least will no longer be supported as of this month, you really should be planning to upgrade. You need to firstly look at all of the extensions that you're using on your site and whether or not those extensions are available for the current version of Joomla. If not, you need to find an equivalent. You need to look at the template that you're using and whether or not the template provider or the designer is still around and has a new version of that template. If not, you need to get a new design, and it's probably a good opportunity to do that anyway. And then you need to go looking for, I think it's called JUpgrade, which is I don't know if it's an extension or a script, to be honest, I haven't used it, but it is something that someone in the community put together to help you upgrade from a 1.5 site to a 2.5 site now. The bottom line is you want to do this somewhere else. you definitely don't want to do it to your live site and cross your fingers. You'll almost certainly run into trouble. So you would need to be doing it either offline first or on a test account with a website host. That's a brief answer. Hope that at least gives you some direction. Stephen from the United States asks, what is the best way to obtain search engine optimization? Hey, that's a 2-day answer. I can't answer that. I mean, I've touched on it in the presentation today. The bottom line is that Google looks at indicators such as the number of links into your site, the quality of those links. And these days they're more often looking at social indicators, what's being said about you on social platforms like Facebook and Twitter. And you know, there's 200. They've stated that there are 200 different criteria to rank a site. One of the best things that you can do, though, is have a bigger site. And no, I'm not going to tell you that. Bottom line is that most sites are quite small, 4, 5, 6 pages sometimes, maybe 20. By adding content to your site over and over and over again and making sure that that content gets indexed by Google, that can be one of the best ways to increase what's called the authority of your website. And that's something that you've got control over. So writing more content is a helpful thing. Rolando just says, beyond Joomla basics. Well, we have a course called Beyond the Basics. I'd recommend that. And if you haven't already, have a look at the basics, as that it provides a really good overview. We've also got a very extensive blog. There's this newsletter this week was issue number 182, and the majority of those back issues have been put into our blog, so you can learn a lot there too. Feel free to ask a question in the forum. Stafford from the US says that your brand's spanking new to Joomla and you'll learn by listening. I hope you did. Joan from the US asks, can I import my website into Joomla to redesign it? I created my site with Microsoft Front Page 97. Now, you actually said in 97. There was a Front Page 97, and if you're using that to update your website, boy oh boy, it's kind of old. Can I import it into Joomla? No, is the easy answer. There's no import a front page site button as such. Really, you're starting from scratch, I'm afraid. And if you've got something that's probably as old as 1997, now would be the time to do that. That's a pretty old site. You can copy and paste content to an extent, certainly text. Images you'll probably need to re-upload. So no, I'd be starting from scratch. Please watch the basics. That'll give you a good overview of Joomla, and you can find some great templates, either free ones or commercial ones. By the way, we're starting to put a templates page together on our site. If you are brand new, I'd encourage you to go there and have a look. You'll find it under Resources, Recommended Templates. These are template providers that we have worked with and who we like. That might be a good shortcut for you too. Julia from CA, what's that? Canada, I guess. You've said comments page, home page, contact page. I don't know what you mean by that. Home page, hopefully some of the planning tips that I gave today will be helpful for planning a home page. A contact page, yep. Where do I talk about that? That's in Joomla Pro. I show you how the contacts component in Joomla works. Or in Beyond the Basics, I've got a web forms one as well. Comments page. Comments page? Do you really want a comments page, or do you want comments underneath articles? There is a great free extension called Commento by my friends at stackideas.com. If you go to stackideas.com, have a look at this thing called Commento. And what this does is it puts comments underneath standard Joomla articles so that your audience can leave comments. You might find that helpful. It's free. You've got to register on their site. They've got a paid version if you want support, but it's free. Armando from PE. I don't know where that is, but you've written something in Spanish. I'm sorry, but my Spanish is not so hot. I did do a translation, though, and you asked something about genealogy. I don't really have an answer to you, sorry. Genealogy, Joomla, I don't know why you'd want to put it into a Joomla site. I'd need more answers to, more information to answer your question. Please write in the forum in English. Kevin from the US, yeah, fair point. I think this came up a couple of times. Continual updates are a major concern, and I would like to see how best to handle these from the start. Okay, great question. Let me just check here for a moment. Okay. updates. A minor update is usually, not always, is usually pretty straightforward. So right now we're at 2.5.6. The next minor update, and I don't know when that will be 2.5.7. Updating those versions is usually pretty straightforward. You use the update feature in Administrator and, hit the button and off you go, and it's pretty good. More recently, that wasn't the case. I don't know which version it was. I think they released 2.5 and it was a bit of a nightmare, and a couple of days later 2.5.5, and then 2.5.6 came out, something like that. My advice there is, unless it is a major security release, and that's normally made clear in the announcement, then leave it a couple of days, then update. A major version, though, say from 2.5 to version 3, which is due late this month, is definitely a different issue. Once again, in theory, there should be a relatively smooth update process. It should not ever be as hard as it has been in the past, because some of the changes that came into more recent Joomla versions have been massive, such as the 1.5 to 1.6. It's not easy to update those two versions. The project is conscious of that, and hopefully we'll have smoother transition in the future. I'm going to hold any more comments to the later question, because I remember somebody else asked something there. I'll follow up. How best to handle these from the start? Well, when you're updating, you need to check basically one thing, that all of the third-party extensions that you're using are compatible with the new version of Joomla. I've made this mistake. I've just assumed, like our previous membership piece of software, if I can call it that, was awful. I assumed, yeah, this will be fine. I hit the button and walked away, and then 2 days later thought, why aren't I getting any sales? And sure enough, something had messed up and I hadn't tested it properly, and there you go. So really, that's all you need to ask yourself. Are the extensions up to date? Update the extensions first, then update Joomla. Do you plan to record these webinars? In South Africa, it's 2 a.m. Well, yes, I'm planning to. Whether or not it works, I don't know. Gerald, if you happen to have got up at 2 a.m., thank you. I hope this has been informative. No, is that really your name? From the US, asked, do you provide web development and design services? If yes, I have a project which I need expert help on. No. A few months ago, I gave up all of our development work to concentrate on doing training full-time. Long story short, I was finding it incredibly difficult to do both, and if I'm going to be honest, I was doing a pretty mediocre job of both, and decided I would rather be excellent at one rather than mediocre at two. We do get this question a bit. Of course, Joomla and our training is designed to be done by yourself, but there will be occasions where you need to do something that's more complicated or complex than is covered in our training, or quite simply you've just decided that it's a better use of your time and money to get an expert to do it. I don't have much of an answer for that on our site yet. I would love to put together on our new resources section a page of recommended developers. It's hard to do that, and because I only want to recommend people that I know are good, and it's hard to find out if someone's good. So right now my advice is go to one of the freelance sites. And this, Robert, is when I was going to ask you a question. Can you please try and find wasn't it a blog post that, I think you even wrote it, that discussed some ways to get your project outsourced? And there's a whole bunch of freelance sites. Now, if the system works, Robert's going to go and look for that blog post and put it in the chat. So I'm going to skip that because it might take a while and come back to you. But if you are looking for that, go and check it out. If I don't come back to it, I'll put a big asterisk here and try and remember. Okay, this comes up a bit. From France asks, Docman or better file manager, Moodle integration, PayPal integration, tight to video, or pages across like your site? That's an awful lot to answer. So I'm sorry, I'm just going to pick one. Docman, no I won't. I'll give you a very brief answer. Docman is a document management tool that is helpful if you have lots of files to download. I don't know what you're really asking me there, but yes, it exists and it's a nice tool. There are others. Check out the Joomla extensions directory. Moodle is a learning management system that I know almost nothing about. this has been asked a couple of times, and I've been asked a couple of times over the years. I've had a very quick look at it. I don't think it interests me, so really I'm not the best person to talk to. I remember once looking for a freelancer at odesk.com, and I noted that she was an expert in Moodle and Joomla. So if you're actually looking for some paid help, you might like to go to odesk.com and do a search for something like Joomla Moodle and see if you can find this lady, as she's done some projects there. Now, Robert's given that link there privately. How do I get that in the chat to everyone? Our search on our website's not working at the moment, so I'd rather give you the link. There you go. That's a list of 10 places to find a Joomla developer. You also asked PayPal integration. Yeah, well, there's lots of extensions that offer PayPal. Video pages, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Okay, somebody else, JJ from the US asks, I have, and I won't give you URL here, how can I populate additional pages automatically? Do you really want to do that? Google frowns on duplicate content, and really one of the best ways of populating pages automatically is by just displaying RSS feeds from other websites. Problem is, once Google sees it, they may well not index that page, because one of the challenges that Google has had over the years is indexing lots of the same content or very similar content. So the first question you need to ask yourself is, do you want to do that? How to populate additional pages automatically? That's the only answer I've got. I don't know. How to get automatic content? You need to buy an automatic content robot. Or hire someone for in a sweatshop to do it. I don't know. That might be the sort of question that you need to expand on in our forum. Hello, Millie from the US. We're all the Aussies. Please give any tips, advice about installing Joomla to a basic HTML, CSS only site. The only thing I can really respond to there is please watch the basics. That gives you a very good overview of how to install Joomla and how to get started with it. Here's a good one. This is possibly for you, Robert. You used to work for IBM. Brian from the US asks, help with IBM P server install on AIX operating system. Good luck with that. I've got no idea. I did have a quick look, and it looks like it's some sort of Linux or Unix-based environment, though. So if you've got PHP there and MySQL database, well, yeah, I guess you can probably do that. But I've got no idea. I know a lot of things I know a little about a lot of things, jack of all trades, but that's one that's beyond me. P server, have a look at a lesson. Oh, Robert says it's AIX, not Linux. Well, maybe the answer to that is no. A Unix environment is, and by the way, I say Linux, I don't know if it's Linux or Linux. To me, anyway, if it's a Unix type environment, then, maybe it'll work. Have a look at the lesson where I talk about how to create a database via the command line. This is the first time in the 4 years I've been involved in this where I've actually had to give this advice. I created that lesson, and I didn't think anyone would ever need it, but possibly that's the one for you. So there are certain system requirements for Joomla, and that might be a case where you can't do it. Marcos from the US asks a question that's not really a Joomla question. How did you do the show time in my zone box? I would like to include a similar option in a website called Service Areas. We're using a third-party piece of software to run this webinar. It's called GoToWebinar, and they provide that functionality. That page was not hosted on my site. They provide all the registration facilities, and so it's just, I guess, some fancy script that does that. You'll need to look elsewhere to do that on your Joomla site. You never know, there might be an extension available, or you might be able to find someone on one of those freelance sites to help you out for a few bucks. How are we going for time? It's 20 to 10 here, so that's about, that's tracking all right. Kathleen from the US asks, how do I keep individuals from writing comments that advertise their business links or interests instead of responding to my post? Well, that's called spam. You might not think of it as spam. You might think of spam as just unsolicited email. But when you're getting comment spam is also what people call it. It is a pain, and it's a pain for lots and lots of people. Really, it depends on the software that you're using. For example, if you wanted to use this, it's still open, this Commento thing. It does have some anti-spam protection built into it. The best way you can do that is to moderate comments. Of course, that's a pain, but that's really the only advice that I've got for you. You need some way of filtering those out, and the application that you're using to provide comments will usually have some sort of way of filtering those out to an extent. C, as in SEA, from the US, has written, how do I learn to design my own templates? And this one's come up a lot. Now, we do have, I've got to give a disclaimer with this one, we do have a training course in Joomla Pro which talks about creating your own Joomla templates. I didn't mention that when I went through the Joomla Pro training because, well, it ain't finished. It got to a point where I found it a bit too difficult to teach and I gave up. Sorry. It will be done, I'm really hoping, this year. There's just now so many other things on my priority list that it sort of fell into the too hard basket. However, the 4, I think, lessons that are there already are quite helpful. They do give a very good overview and put you in the right direction to get started. And for a lot of people, it's probably all you need. I did want to expand on it a lot more than that, though, and I will. So I guess all I can say there is, if you're thinking that way, go ahead and grab that course. And if you then find that it doesn't work out for you, just drop us a note and we'll give you a refund. No questions asked. Okay, Gordon from Great Britain. How do I make sure things like AckyMail and Kunina information get transferred to my new site? Right. So AckyMail or ACY Mail and Kunina are third-party extensions. Now, what do you mean by transferred to your new site? I take it you're building a new site and you probably want the data to get transferred. So this is actually a tough question. Do you build your new site on your existing site, or do you build a brand new site somewhere else and then transfer the data? I think in your case it's going to be the latter. So build your new site. Make sure that you have the same versions of the extensions on both of your sites, and then and make sure all the settings are the same within the 2 extensions, and then you should be able to copy the data from the tables from one site to the other, and that's probably what you're actually asking. How do you do that? That's I think going to be too long an answer for today. You can do that if you have both sites on the same server and you have access to PHP MyAdmin on both. There is, I'm not really an expert in this, but there is a way to copy tables from one database to another. That'll be the way to do it. Test it out and then go from there. It might be the sort of thing that if you're not feeling confident, it would be worth spending a few dollars getting an expert to do it for you. Ted from the US. Hi there. How do I write my own template? I've just answered that. So consider those same comments. Renee from the US. How do you go about getting a domain name? You know, I'm so pleased that you asked this. How do you go about getting a domain name? One of the things that I've been questioning is, how simple do I need to get in my training? Is it too simple? Is it too advanced? And one of the things that I'm going to be adding to beyond the basics, I'm writing the structure right now, is what I'm going to call an extended version of the basics. And that's going to include really simple stuff like, how do you get a domain name? How do you choose a web host? How do you plan the site? And that was what today was about, that type of thing. However, to answer your question now, you know, I think the best way of getting a domain name is to ask your web host. They'll often do it for you and for free in some cases. In fact, I didn't mention that deal with SiteGround. They give you a free domain name for the first year at least. So it's quite a nice deal. The reason I advise that is because you then have one contact for your web hosting and your domain name needs, and so that if something goes wrong, you've got one person to sort that out for you. Over the years, I've had people forget to renew their domain names and they're never sure who to contact. I used to, I don't anymore, but I used to do web hosting and domain name sales. And so they'd ring one person and then get the runaround, then ring another person and get the runaround. So ask your web host. It might cost you a couple of dollars more. More often than not, it doesn't. How to choose a domain name and all of that, I think that's beyond today, and so I'm not going to go into that. But for those who do get beyond the basics, when I add that new material, I do have a lesson on some tips on choosing a domain name. Hopefully that's helpful. Next question is from Wardell. How do you locate and factor in freelance help? How do you locate? Have a look in the chat window now, which you should see on the right-hand side of the screen. You might need to click the little red arrow towards the top left to expand it to see the chat window. And you'll see that I've added a link there. That's how to find freelancers for Joomla. My favorite, the one that I've had the most luck with is Odesk. O as in the letter O, desk.com. I think they've even got a Joomla group there. Roland from the US asks, how does Joomla compare with WordPress and Drupal? You need to watch lesson 3, I think it is, might be 2, of the basics. I do actually talk very briefly about WordPress and Drupal. To give you an overview now, give Drupal a miss. The sort of people who are on this webinar are not likely to be the sort of people who would want to use Drupal. It's very similar to Joomla in a lot of ways in terms of its structure and thinking. It is fair to say that it's more developer orientated, and if you're interested in that, I don't think you'd be on this webinar, so it's pretty fair that I can just say give that one a miss. WordPress I could talk about all day. WordPress is a fantastic tool. Lots of people in the WordPress world hate Joomla, and lots of people in the Joomla world hate WordPress. I'm somewhat more pragmatic and acknowledge it for its strengths, which are it's an excellent blogging platform. I use it on my own site. I've just started should I tell you this? Yeah, I've just started a site called richardpearce.com where I'm talking more about internet marketing and little plans that I've got for my own products outside of Joomla. And I'm using WordPress for that. And Joomla people would be horrified to know that, but it's mainly so that I can have a good understanding of WordPress so that I can talk accurately about it. There's a lot of misinformation. After saying that, though, there are a couple of things that I actually much prefer with Joomla, and I sort of hinted on one earlier on. It's just easier to assign modules. You've got to get a plug-in with WordPress to do that. What else? I just found a number of things when I started using it, and I just thought, gee, that's not so intuitive. It's hard to get rid of author names on blog posts, which you might not want, and publish dates and things like that. For beginners, though, got to tell you, it is an easier platform, hands down an easier platform to learn because it doesn't do as much. It doesn't do as much. It's easier to learn. The interface is nicer. Out of the box, SEO is definitely stronger. And if all you wanted was a blog site, you know, I'd be saying WordPress is a serious consideration. For a lot of people, though, they start with a blog site and then want to do other things later. And so I would still encourage you to consider using Joomla from the start, as I feel that it provides a greater range of options for larger sites. And I'm so hesitant to make any of these comments because Joomla haters will then get on and say that I'm wrong. Look, you can do heaps of stuff with WordPress. I'm not saying that. But yeah, if you want a really brief overview, have a look at, I think it's lesson 3 in the basics. Robert has pointed something out. He's actually given the link to that. So yeah, that's a good idea. So if you want to have a look at that lesson, yeah, it's actually lesson 2. Okay, I'm going to put that in the chat too. You'd think I'd know, but I've got so much product now that it's hard to keep on top of what's what. I'm just going to get rid of this on the screen so it's not a distraction at the moment. Okay, next question is from Kevin, US. I'm going to have to speed these up a bit, folks. How easy is it to assign authors to make changes to the website compared to WordPress? We need to make it as easy as possible. Of course you do. I haven't used the author feature much in WordPress because I'm really only using it for my own site, so a little hard to compare it to WordPress. The Joomla ACL lessons in Joomla Pro talk about how to assign authors to certain parts of your website. It's a very strong part of Joomla, but it takes a while to learn. Certainly that feature exists in WordPress. As I say, I haven't had much of a play with it, so I'm not going to give you a very good answer to that one. Once again, you might find that the community in the forum would be a better way to answer that. Wale, sorry, forgive me if I can't pronounce that right. Now your email bounced, so you're probably not listening to this, but if you are from Nigeria, how to create Joomla extensions. This is an advanced topic that I don't cover. I've pitched myself more to beginners and intermediate users. Creating your own extensions requires PHP programming skills, a good understanding of MySQL databases, and that's just an area I don't want to go into, and it's not my strength. Andrew Eddy, one of the co-founders of the Joomla project, has a website that does go into this, and if I had thought ahead of time I might have brought that up. hang on a sec, let me see if I can find it. It's something like the art of Joomla, and he's then got another page. If you're in Sydney by any chance, doesn't seem to be many of us Aussies on today, there's the Sydney Joomla Day coming up on the 20th and 21st of October, and Andrew will be speaking there, and as will I, and you might want to come along to that. Yeah, so if you go to learn.theartofjoomla.com, he has some information about some training lessons on how to do advanced stuff. So it's learn, I'll leave that up, learn.theartofjoomla.com. Next, Andrew from Australia, welcome. How to create a new website in Joomla without losing the, oh, this is an interesting question, without losing the age of the old site. How to transfer across so the aging continues. It looks like the box where you get into this question isn't very big, and so a lot of them have been cut off. Right. Google has 200 plus criteria for ranking a website. One of those criteria is the age of the domain name. I guess their thinking is that the older a domain name, the more stable that business is, and the better the experience perhaps that people will get on that site. This makes it quite challenging for beginners who want to compete for a particular keyword, as they have a brand new domain name and therefore can't compete as easily. I'm just going to take this one off now. Okay. So how do you transfer age? Well, the age is not related to the content on the site. It's related to the age of the domain name. Domain name ages can be looked up. It's all publicly accessible information, and Google has access to that information. So don't worry about losing the age. You won't do that unless perhaps you let the domain name expire. I'm not actually quite sure about that. But that's not a consideration. Your consideration is different. You will have a number of pages that are indexed in Google. And if you move to a new website and you use a different URL, then those pages will get lost and the benefit of those backlinks will get lost. That's a consideration. So you need to do, and I don't know what your level of understanding in all of this is, you need to do something called a 301 redirect on all of those old links if necessary, if you're using a different URL on your new site. Once again, this is well beyond the scope of today's training, so I'm not going to go into that so much. Some of the better search engine friendly extensions will help you with this, and a number of people are now coming out saying you don't need an SEO extension. Well, this is an area where you might. Actually, if your current site is not Joomla, now I think about it, I haven't used this feature yet, but there is a redirect feature within Joomla 2.5. That might be all you need. If not, have a look at a thing called ACE SEF. Let me put that in the chat. ACE SEF. That's the one that I'm using now. SH404 SEF is another popular one. One of those two extensions would be the go. Yeah, let me not confuse things, so I'll just leave it at that. Just going to take a little pause, folks, while I take a drink. And we move on. I'm glad at least someone's from Australia here. Thank you, Andrew. Mohammed from SL. What's that, Sri Lanka? How to create customized template using the CSS modules and with Photoshop. I'm going to dump that one into the how to create a template category, and the comments that I made earlier apply to that. Milos from RS. I've got no idea. Russia? Someone tell me. I'm curious. How to deal with constant Joomla upgrades with extensions failing to follow at the same pace. I made that comment earlier, and I don't have anything to add to that. You know, you've got to just make sure that your extensions are up to date, and you don't need to update to the latest Joomla version, as I'm going to explain with a later question. I'm going with Yakubu from NG, Nigeria again, I think. How to design a Joomla template from scratch. I've got a bit of a common thread there. So yeah, I am going to get onto this. So same comments apply. Jerry from the US asks, how do you evaluate templates for the layout that you want? How to evaluate templates for the layout you want? Yeah, it's a good question. I know what you're asking. I'm just not quite sure how to answer it. I guess the teaching that I gave you today about planning and wireframes might help. Once you've got an idea of the elements that need to go on a page, you can find a template that has a layout that matches those elements. keep in mind that when you're looking at the demo version of templates, that the template provider tends to display everything. And for some people, they get a bit overwhelmed by that, thinking, well, I don't need a site that's busy. So please have more vision than that. Look at the demo and just think, well, what if I didn't include that and didn't include that? More often than not, well, in fact, in every case, when I've used a pre-built template, I've never, ever had it look like what it looks like in the demo. Hopefully that's helpful. Jeff, another Aussie. How to get the right data from the customer prior to commencing a site. This means that when the customer says that they have the DAT, I'm sorry, it looks like it's been crossed off, but I can get the gist of what you're asking. Okay, yeah, I'm going to give you a piece of advice here that is not going to be applicable to everyone. Use your own judgment and don't scream at me if it all goes wrong. If you're brand new, you need to get business and you need to get it now, and so you're scrambling basically, and you need to put up with a lot of nonsense in the early days. You need to do a lot of work. But if you have some experience and you can be a little bit picky about which jobs you take on and which jobs you don't, then the following strategy might be helpful to you. And boy, I wish that I had done this much earlier on in my web development career. It may well have meant the difference between quitting when I did and moving on just with training, or being able to do both. I would have liked to have done both, but anyway, another story. I started adopting this approach. I would go and meet with a client for about an hour to an hour and a half. I would get a very basic overview of what they needed. And, if you've done a few websites, a dozen or so, then you should be at a point where you can get a pretty good feel from that initial meeting as to what's going to be required for the website. And so in your mind, you should be able to come up with a ballpark price of what the site's going to cost to develop. Let's say you think it's going to be a $3,000 job. So what I then did was I would get them out of the market, first of all. And I would do that by saying, okay, well, we work very much like an architect. We will prepare for you initially a website plan. This ties in nicely with today. And that plan is like a blueprint, and you would be able to then take that to any web developer to get your website built. Of course, I hope I'm going to be that web developer, but it doesn't have to be necessarily. You could take those plans. They're very comprehensive, and it helps if you've got another plan or even a generic plan that you can show them. And basically what that plan is a wireframe of all of the pages and all the elements that you think need to be on the page. Now here's the clincher. I would say to them, and that process costs $1,000. Of course, that comes off the final price. Now, you probably won't want to commit to that unless you've got at least a ballpark price of what I think that this project's going to cost all up. And I think it's going to be $3,000 to $4,000. So you always put if you're thinking it's three, say 3 plus. And so all you need to do to get started is give us $1,000 as a deposit. We'll go away and create the plan for you, and then come back and have another meeting to make sure that that plan meets your expectations. Now, this hasn't quite answered your question. I know that. I'm going to come to that in a moment. But I point that out because this is quite a nice strategy. First of all, it helps with your cash flow. You get some nice money up front. Don't spend it all, though, in case you do have to give a refund on it. Two, it gets them out of the market. They're not going to go and talk to any other web developers now. You're the guy. And three, it shows if you've got someone who's serious. If you've got someone who's serious, the whole issue of getting the right content from them up front tends to be less of a risk. Those who mess about it or who really and ah at that stage, either you haven't done a good job selling your service or they're the wrong type of customer. Sorry, I've gone off on a bit of a rant on this one, but it's something that actually worked really well for me. I just said to people who weren't prepared to do that, well, no, sorry, we don't work for free. If you want us to do the blueprints, then that's what we charge. As I say, we can give you a refund if you decide that that's not the appropriate thing, and it comes off the final price. But you know what? It actually really worked very well for me. And I don't think that was just because I had a lot of experience and I came across well. I think it was because people don't know what they want. They want someone to sell to them. And when somebody actually comes along and takes a different approach to most web developers, that works quite well. I hope you can see that by using that approach, you then tend to get better quality customers. And that's why I said at the start that this isn't going to work for everybody because, you might need business no matter what. And you will lose customers as a result of doing this, no question. But there's something that perhaps next time you might like to try. And then, they're taking you seriously. You need to say, right, well, just like we're building a house, we need to work out what needs to go into the house. Would you like to spend another hour going through that today, or can I make another meeting in a few days or something like that? Got to move on. There's more I could talk about that. Let me just check how many more pages we've got. 1, 2, 3, 4. Goodness me. All right, I better speed up. Benita from SN, I wonder where that is. It sounds like Sweden or somewhere like that. How to modify a Joomla template. Yeah, well, same as building a Joomla template, really. So same comments apply as earlier. Carol from Great Britain. How to publish content is a topic worth delving deep into that day, preventing writer's block. Yes, it's a great topic. I wanted to give you an insight into that by saying write short copy on your navigation pages and longer copy on your other pages. Preventing writer's block, though, is something that's a bit beyond the scope of this today. What I would recommend you, though, to read is a book by Pressfield. Is it Stephen? I've recommended this a couple of times. It's been very helpful for me. It doesn't actually give you a step-by-step hint to solving writer's block, but it's written in such a way that it helps you to understand why you get writer's block. And once you understand it, understand why, you're magically able to sort of push through that. And let me just, sorry, I'm a man. I can only do one thing at once. Let me type this in. I think it's called Do the Work or something like that. Yeah, this is the guy. Best book that I have found to help you understand why you don't want to do the work, even if you think you want to do it, and how to push through this invisible barrier. It's at Amazon. I got it on Kindle, and it costs $4.99. It is the best $4.99 you could ever spend. Right. Abby from Singapore asks how to put an opt-in box in a Joomla website. Get the code, stick it into a module. It's not hard. The hard part is the fact that most Joomla editors strip out HTML code. Again, I've got a blog post. I might need to revise it. It's a little old on how to prevent that from happening. So look through the site for that. But an opt-in box, usually you're getting that from, say, a newsletter form like MailChimp or Campaign Monitor or one of them, or Aweber. You just take that code, put it into a module in HTML mode, and as long as you've got the correct settings in your HTML editor, it won't strip that code. What you can also do temporarily if you're having trouble doing that is in global configuration under your profile, change the editor temporarily from, well, the default is TinyMCE. Change it from that to, what's it called? No code, no editor. I can't remember now. And then go ahead, put that code in, then go back to your, save it, go back to your profile and put it back to the way it was. Hope that makes sense. Mark, greetings from Australia. How to SEO a Joomla site, and what's the best extension for that? Okay, SEO is a long topic. We've got 45 minutes or so worth in Joomla Pro that talks about this. And what's the best extension? Well, I've just mentioned a couple of them there in the chat. I'm now using ACE SEF. A lot of other people use SH404 SEF. Derek from Nowhere writes, how to set up your website for best SEO. Okay, same comments apply. Patricio from CL, Colombia. How to use the animated image for the top web page. There are extensions that do that. That's probably the easiest answer I can give you to that. I think I'm going to have to speed up these a little bit. Okay, Isaiah from the US. I know HTML and CSS, beauty. But where do I start? The home page, but what part first? What would normally be last? The beauty of Joomla and other content management systems is that you don't need to know HTML and CSS. If you do, it's a bonus. You'll find that there are some occasions where it's helpful to know that, but you really don't need to know it. You don't create sites using HTML and CSS. If you haven't already, can I encourage you to watch the free basics course? That I think will answer a number of those questions, plus the information that I gave today. Dave from the US, I want to build an e-commerce website that has on-demand training videos. Oh, you mean like mine? Can Joomla do this? Well, yes. How? You need a membership piece of software, and I've used 3 now. The first 2 were just, there's no nice way to say this, they were just dog awful. I had so much trouble with them. And so I'm going to be updating the membership videos in Joomla Pro as soon as I can. I'm now using a thing called Open Source Membership. It's OSE Membership. Just search that. I'll put it in the chat. OSE Membership, is it? Or Members? Membership, I think. That's the best one that I've found for that. I am also considering adding a series to Joomla Pro, which actually goes through my entire process. And a number of people over the years have basically said, I want to copy what you're doing. Now, they don't want to copy the Joomla training, they want to copy the model. And so I've learned more recently how to do membership sites right, how to secure your videos using a service called Amazon S3 and Amazon CloudFront, so people can't pinch your videos, how to take payments, how to do follow-up and all of that. So I'm hoping to do that. But the bottom line is, to get started, have a look at that extension. I think you'll find that helpful. It's just so strange that sometimes the same sorts of questions follow each other. Look, forgive me on this one. I'm going to get this wrong. Yahira, I'm going with. The initials YP from PE, Peru. I don't know. I want to create a membership site, but it seems so difficult with Joomla. Can you give me some lights? Thanks. Love to. Check out OSE Membership. George, without an E. Is that still George? Montgomery from the US. I want to edit a template and include a contact form that links to my email, thanks. Well, editing a template is, of course, a bit different from creating a template from scratch. And the template code, if you have those skills, is found in the root directory under templates, and then the name of your template, and then all over the place. You probably need to be looking for a file that looks similar to index.php or something like that. There you go, that's the way you do it. That links to my email, a contact form that links to my email. Joomla has a very basic contact component built into it. It's all right, it does the job. You might like to look for a form builder. A number of people are using a thing called Fox Contact Form, and others are using, oh come on, what's it called? The other one, Chrono Forms it's called. And so you might want to look into one of those extensions. They're both free. Next page, I've got Claudia from the US asking, I want to make a puppies for sale site. Should I start and then look for help or look for a template? A raw beginner with Joomla. Welcome, Claudia. Puppies for sale. There's all sorts of things I could say here, none of which are appropriate. Let me think. Should I start and then look for help or look for a template? Have you watched the basics yet? Please do that. That will give you a good overview of Joomla. Puppies for sale, absolutely. You can do that just with normal Joomla articles. Do you need to look for a template? Well, that's part of the process, yes. And maybe that the training that I've given you today will help answer some of those questions as well. As I've said earlier, please, if you feel that you would like to get a follow-up to this, write in the forum. As I've had a lot of people register for today and a lot of people on, it might take us a little bit longer than normal to get back to you. There is no way I'm even going to try and pronounce your name. AZ from Canada. I'm a beginner and would like to use a template for my website. Beautiful. That's how it works. Watch the basics. That'll give you a good overview. Tony, I recognise your email address from Australia. I'm interested in editing source code. I guess that's similar to the comments. Welcome, Tony, by the way. I guess that's similar to comments I just made about templates, or maybe by source code you mean just entering HTML. So yeah, you absolutely can do that with Joomla, but it does have a tendency to strip code. So if you mean within an article, then yeah, you can do that. If you mean within the template, that's where it gets a bit more advanced and you need to get into your template files and mess about there. Robin, welcome from the US. I'm interested to learn about how to price my labour and services so that I can effectively compete in the marketplace. The comment I'm going to make there is similar to the one that I made before, a little different actually. The thing, I guess, the bit of advice I would give you there is don't go too cheap. I always like to think that I was being a great guy by having really affordable designs and people stuck with me forever. The truth is, though, that I was too cheap and I could have made a lot more money. You need to find a happy balance, I feel, in business between charging a fair price and making a profit. I was probably more on the left side of that line. And if I had my time over, I certainly would have charged more. So that's the first bit of advice. It's not always about price either. That's really the best answer I can give you. Don't sell on price. It never works and you get the wrong customers. You need to sell on value. It's one of the first things that just about every business advice book tells you. So what do I mean by sell on value? You don't need to be saying to customers, this is going to cost you $500. You need to say that at some point, but instead you should be saying, well, yes, I can help you get blah. You need to work out early what their goal is for their website, and then work the conversation towards saying, yeah, we can do this, and it's going to take this amount of time and so forth. Pricing your services, though, if you go too cheap, you've got the danger of being the no-name brand. If you go too expensive, you'll scare people off. It's a bit of trial and error, and it's going to grow as your experience grows. With even a basic 6-page website, I can't see how you can make money out of it for less than $1,000. These days, if I was still doing it, I'd be charging a minimum of $2. But that's because I've got a lot of experience and I had a team that helped me put the thing together. Plus we had great outcome. You could get away with $3 if you're a professional designer. Absolutely. I've spoken to some people, developers that have told me that they will not get out of bed for a job that's less than $10,000. If it's a business site, businesses have budgets and they are happy to spend them if you can prove to them that you can offer the value. Anyway, I'm rambling, so I need to move on. Michael from the US, I'm still a little fuzzy on module positioning. Well, please watch the basics again. I think that does cover it fairly well. And about 2 weeks ago, I updated that series, so you might find it's better now. Modules are like boxes. Each template has positions in them, and you need to stick modules inside one of those positions. I would also love to learn how to embed a single song MP3 that people can click on. No, you don't. Do you really want music on your site? Well, if you're a musician, maybe. There are extensions in the Joomla extensions directory that do that, but it's hard because the challenge is when you navigate to another page, the player stops and has to start again. You get around that by creating frames, and frames are a pain in the neck. I'm going to encourage you to reconsider that. If you want them to download it, we'll just create a link to the file to download it. Can you tell as I go on that I'm trying to get a bit quicker? Steve from the US. Incorporate Moodle and video conferencing. Now, have I already talked about Moodle? I've done so many of these now I've forgotten. I think I did earlier. Moodle is a learning management system. Yes, I did. I said go to Odesk and look for that lady if you need help. I don't know much about it. Sorry, I'm not the right person to ask that. And I've had some feedback from people that say that it's not a very nice platform. Other people seem to love it. It's another open source project. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not the best person to answer that. Video conferencing. Do you really want to do video conferencing within a Joomla website? I mean, there are certain things that just don't suit the Joomla platform. Yeah, you probably could do something clever, but I'm not trying to get this webinar working within Joomla. It's a separate bit of software. I think video conferencing really falls into that category. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that that's really the right approach. After saying that, you might want to look at the Joomla extensions directory and see if there is something there that perhaps would link in with the Joomla user database, for example. Kelly from Canada, g'day. Interested in K2 and how it works with Joomla. K2 is what's called a content construction kit, and it's beyond the scope of this training today to talk about it. I'm sorry. I think that eventually I will do a K2 training course for Joomla Pro. There is a lot of information on the getk2.org website, and I'm afraid I'm going to just have to push you back to there for the moment to answer that. Oh, after saying that, we did actually do some blog posts, gosh, it must have been about a year ago, on K2. So have a look in the blog. That'll give you a bit of an overview. Robert wrote a whole lot of stuff now I think about it. So sorry, yes, well, I probably can give you some direction there. We gave a bit of an overview to K2. JP from South Africa writes, is a blog necessary? And again, this is one of those questions that I could spend an hour on. Is a blog necessary? No, is the answer, and let's move on. But yes, as well. Is it necessary? No. Is it a good idea? Yes. Blogs are great for all sorts of reasons. It's a way to communicate. It's a way to get lots of content on your site, which can help with SEO. Excuse me. There's another point I was going to make there. It's a way of getting feedback from your audience, and that's very valuable. I would say that the vast majorities of business sites, non-profit sites, all need a blog. If it's a personal site, maybe. I think as a minimum with a personal site, you'd want to at least have a comment section. Hope that's helpful. Sue, I think I've seen you in the forum a couple of times. Welcome from GB. Is it more effective to describe with images or text? Great question. It depends, though, is my answer. And I guess you're just going to have to use a bit of intelligence to this. I said before, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and so from that, you might determine that, yes, it's better to describe with pictures. But really the answer is it depends. What's the picture of? What are you trying to describe? Does that work well with a picture? My comments about using a pro photographer also apply here. It might be better to have a really good quality picture or possibly nothing at all. Pictures can actually work against you on some occasions, but usually only if the picture's not very relevant. If I was looking to order a pizza tonight and I read a fantastic description that got my mouth watering, then that's all I'd need. But then if it was accompanied by a picture that looks like something that my 6-year-old made, then as much as I love my 6-year-old, I probably wouldn't buy it. Don't have a yes or no answer to that, but hopefully that's helpful. Chris, also from Great Britain, asks, is it possible to change fonts and paragraph spacings with Joomla? Is it dependent on the template? Well, yes, it is dependent on the template, but you can change fonts and paragraph spacing. And this is done by a thing called cascading style sheets. And it's a bunch of code that they're rules, if you like, that determine how the content on the page appears. If you're familiar with CSS, you can change CSS with the Joomla template. If you're not familiar, you're going to need help. It's not something that is easily taught, and if you have a simple request for the sake of probably $5, you'll find a freelancer who will do that for you. How are we going? I've got 2 more pages. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Wow, I've still got 20 questions to go. I think that means we're probably going to be at least another 10 minutes, which is about where I was going to wrap it up. So Donald from the US, is Joomla a preferred web development platform for a novice? Yes, absolutely, because you don't need to know HTML code to build the sites. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're restricted in some way. Joomla sites are used for all sorts of projects, big government projects. There's one I'm probably not sure if I can talk to you about, and all sorts of things. So yes, it can be used for a novice. It's perfect for that, but lots of professional web developers use it for quite extensive applications. I could give you examples. There are some in the Basics, the free course. I encourage it strongly, as you would expect me to. Leanna from the US asks, is there a component or module that will allow someone to quickly leave a site? Okay. This was the one where I wasn't going to give you your name, so I just did. Sorry about that. I won't, though, show you the site that I was going to. Instead, what I'll do is just say, yeah, there's not a component or a module. The site example that you gave me was just really, really simple. It was just a button with a link, and you just click on that link and it takes you to another page. So I know why you're wanting to do that. It's not really a module. It's a bit of JavaScript. The button stays on the page. Even if you scroll up and down, the button is fixed. And that's where you need a script, a little bit of code to make that button stick in place. You know, if you're comfortable talking about your subject and giving this link in our forum, go ahead and do that, and I'll answer you in more detail. If you're not, then I would just pay someone a couple of bucks to get that written. It won't be hard at all. But I'm not familiar with an actual component that does that. You'd need to go through the Joomla extensions directory to do that. Okay. Tammy, you said that you just want to be part of it. Thank you. Thank you, be part of it. Now, again, I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to pronounce your name. BM from South Africa asks, live streams on the web, like speeches or events or webinars perhaps? I think the comment that I made before about using the right tool for the right job applies here. I don't know if you can do a live stream on the web in a Joomla site. You probably can. What's that site called that's big for live streaming? I mean, Google now has this thing called Hangouts. That's not the one I'm thinking of. Ustream, isn't it? Yeah. I'm pretty sure that somebody else asked me that question once, and I had a look at the Ustream site, and there is some embed code where you can embed that stream within a Joomla article. The same comments apply. When you go to save the article, the HTML editor will tend to strip that code out, so you need to be aware of how to do that, get around that issue. Karen from the US, looking forward to understanding the initial structure of the homepage. Thank you. Good. Hope that helped. Preston, your email bounced, so I don't know if you're listening right now, but I'll answer your question in case you are, or if you look at the replay. Preston from Australia writes, tell me about mobile phone websites. Wow, this is again another one of those ones I could talk for ages. Joomla 3 will natively have much greater support for mobile-friendly sites. That might be a reason to upgrade to Joomla 3. However, a lot of template providers already have good support for mobile-friendly sites, and there are even a couple of extensions worth checking out. In Joomla Pro, I actually teach how to build mobile-friendly Joomla websites, but I do it in a way of from the business angle, and we use a thing called Mobile Joomla to do that. You can look that up. I think it's just mobilejoomla.com. There's also a thing called Weaver Apps. Robert, is it W-E-A-V-E-R apps? I haven't had much of a play with that one, but might be worth investigating as well. So there's a lot happening in the Joomla world in terms of mobile friendliness, and so yes is the answer. I don't know. I might do some more training on that, add that to the list. Robert's given me Weaver, W-E-E-V-E-R apps. Look that up, Weaver apps. Chuck from the US. My forte is not writing. What do you say for those who are not strong writers? I did make a couple of comments in the training about the length of content. I don't know. Become a strong writer. Yeah, that's good advice. Look, I don't consider myself to be a strong writer either. I've certainly improved by doing lots and lots and lots and lots of practice. I've got sitting next to me a fantastic training course that I've barely started, and excuse the language, it's called, by John Carlton, The Kick-Ass Copywriting Secrets of a Marketing Rebel. John Carlton has a good reputation in the internet marketing world as being a good trainer of copywriting, and you know, it comes down to time and money, doesn't it? I mean, in my case, I probably just need to pay someone to improve my writing, but it's a skill that is certainly worth pursuing. I don't know how to answer your question, how to become a strong writer, except one of the challenges is writing the thing at all. So look at that Pressfield book I mentioned, and maybe look into doing some training. There was something else actually that I had. I'm going to just pause my screen for a moment because I want to look something up and I don't want to show you what I'm doing. I actually have a website planning website, but the content that's on there is kind of old and I'm a little embarrassed to promote it, so I'm not going to. If you really want to hunt around, you'll find it. But part of the reason I'm doing this webinar today is to start me thinking about redoing that site. And on that site, I do give a reference to a book, and here it is. And I'll give you that now if I can find it quickly. That ain't it. I've got a copy of the book. I can't really give it to you because it does have a thing on it that says, you know, not for distribution. Oh yeah, right. And even though the site had gone down last time I looked for it, it might be back up now. Lovely, here we go. Can you now see the screen? I'll unpause this. There we go. You should see that now. Copywriting.com. What a nice domain to own. And up the top right there, you'll see that there's a book that you can register for free called Aim for the Heart. If you're a completely new writer, you might find that some of the topics that are described in that are helpful. Okay. BF from Nigeria writes, please, I still have problems uploading my Joomla sites. Well, that's actually the reason why in the basics we teach you to develop at a web host. When you're a beginner, that's the way to go. You can have troubles uploading Joomla sites. There's a couple of things to keep in mind. I don't know how to give you a quick answer now, except to suggest you use an extension called Akiba Backup. That's A key. My mouth's getting tired. AK, I'll put it in the chat. AKEBA backup. We do describe this to an extent in Beyond the Basics, if you feel that that would be useful for you. Please, I'm a beginner, writes Umar from Nigeria as well. How interesting. Can you teach me how to start step by step? Sure can. Go and check out the basics. Okay. Progressing beyond, the next question is, Dr. Singh asks, progressing beyond the basics easily. Well, I would recommend our course called Beyond the Basics. I'm not sure how else to answer that, except to also perhaps add that our blog has lots of info. And our forum has lots of very helpful people. John, another Aussie, greetings. SEO as part of planning. Look, I think I've touched on this with the market research, but there is a lot more that I can say about it. If you're still on the call, John, I could get clever and show you something. No, I won't. There's a lot to think about with SEO as part of planning, and it really comes down to keyword research. That tool, that Market Samurai tool that I recommended before, is a very helpful tool for doing keyword research. It don't cost nothing if all you want is the keyword research module. It does have a lot of other features that you might find helpful as well. So to anyone who's just brand new into thinking about SEO, that's a good tool to have. I also in the forum recently recommended a few SEO sites to get started, and some of you have even been kind enough to suggest that I should do an SEO training course, and wow, that'll be fun, but I don't have time this year. I will consider that again next year. Okay, I hope that's helpful. IB from the US, should I edit a core file such as language.php or use an extension that does the same thing? Well, I don't know what you're trying to do. If you're trying to change the text that appears in a certain part of Joomla, that's actually done in Administrator in the language area, the language manager. You can now do text overrides, so you shouldn't be messing with it in the files anymore. But you've actually written language.php. If you're trying to override a part of the Joomla output, there's a better way to do that. So the problem in changing those files is that when you put in a new version of Joomla, it might override the change that you made. Hang on a second, I just need another drink. And so that's not much fun. There's a way of doing these overrides. We've described it back in our blog months ago, and you might find that helpful if you want to go hunting for that. So I'd need more info to answer that question, really, but hopefully that's helpful. We're on to the last page, by the way, folks, so we'll be wrapping this up soon. Now, here's the one that I've been waiting for. Jean from Canada asks, should we use Joomla 3.0? Great question. No. Why not? It's coming out later this month, and so you would think, well, you want the latest and the greatest, but no. In fact, the Joomla project themselves are saying don't use it. So what's the point of putting it out at all? Well, a little while ago, Joomla in their wisdom decided to change their numbering system, which initially was as confusing as all else. Now the numbering system basically goes like this. The first major version is going to be a 0.0. So Joomla 3.0 is a new major version. Your extensions will not work for it. That's why you don't want to use it. And almost every site uses extensions. It will take a while, possibly a long while, for extension developers to catch up and have stable versions for the new version of Joomla. My recommendation, which may change, would be to wait at least one, if not two, minor versions before jumping onto the latest version of Joomla, unless you're missing out on a particular feature that you really must have. So there'll be 3.1 and 3.2, and I probably won't update any of the training until, I suspect 3.2, possibly even longer. The one to really consider going for is the most stable version, which will be 3.5. So there you go. No, I don't think there's any need to. It is going to have some clever things in it, but nothing that would make me jump and get into the new version straight away. I hope that's helpful. Alison from Canada also asks, since pricing, I hope that is Canada, I assume it is, since pricing is variable around the world, how to best estimate the time to complete the project and thus quote it correctly? You know, I'm going to skip this. I think the comments that I made to, who was it, Robin, before, apply here as well. Pricing is variable around the world, and the biggest thing I can explain there is don't price based on hours, price based on the value that you're providing to your client. NZ. I'll have a go. I'll have a go at your first name. Nawab, I think, from Pakistan asks, a step-by-step approach to building a website. Please watch the basics. That will give you a good overview. And then beyond the basics, building a site from scratch is the step-by-step approach that I use. Pablo from the US, thanks a bunch, guys. I appreciate all the help. Thanks, Pablo. I think this is a typo. I think this should be Tammy from the US. This is the one your email bounced before. Hopefully you managed to get back in. I did write to you this morning. The difference and importance of categories and articles, featured articles. Can you watch the basics? I do go into that. A category is just the way of storing articles. A category is like a folder on your computer. Articles are like files on your computer. You need to store articles in categories. Categories are just there for storage and can be useful for laying out your pages. Featured articles are the ones that appear on your home page. John from the US has written, unable to view webinar, will a replay be available? Maybe. Still seems to be recording. The problem with the recording is when I actually hit the stop button, so I'll find out later. I didn't get your question there, Laurent from BE, Belgium maybe. Jerry from the US asks, what are the criteria for buying templates? I've touched on this with earlier questions. I'd be looking at your wireframe and then considering which template would best suit that. There are certain template developers that we like more than others, and we are slowly loading those now into our website. So criteria is more your end price. I mean, they're all about the same price. And whether or not you think that once you've got your plan, whether that content will fit nicely into that template. Tom, hello, from the US. Now this is one I'm going to spend time on. This will be my last question, so I'm going to skip your one. Sorry, Tom, hang in there one minute. Tammy, you did get back on because you've asked the same question again. Beautiful. All right. So, Tom, yours is the last one, and it's an interesting one. And although I've got a lot to say about it, I'm certainly no expert. You have asked me, what do you recommend as far as hosting on IIS? So IIS is the web server platform that Microsoft uses. And the majority of Joomla people like to use the Apache, Linux, PHP, MySQL combination. However, you can host a Joomla website using Microsoft IIS web server. Now, what do I recommend? Well, I don't know. What do you need to know? This advice, though, might be helpful. There are certainly fewer hosts that are expert, Microsoft hosts, Windows hosts, that are experts with Joomla. So only host on IIS if you have a particular need to, I guess. We would encourage you to use the Linux platform. However, the Joomla project people probably won't like me saying that because I know that Microsoft has started to take more of an interest in open source platforms like Joomla. And in their Web Matrix platform, they do have some way of developing a Joomla site locally. Of course, instead of using the MySQL database, they're using Microsoft's SQL Server database. And so the first thing you need to find out is, do you need to use the full version of SQL Server, or can you get away with SQL Server Express? I don't know the answer to that question, because that might make a difference to where you host. Some hosts that provide SQL Server hosting, the SQL add-on can be quite expensive. So that might be helpful. The only areas that I've really run into with problems with IIS hosting, I've only done it once, to be fair, and the challenges that I had were twofold. One, we had to use search engine friendly URLs, and I found that difficult, and I think I might have given up, but that was with a Joomla 1.5 site. I know that I've seen them in the docs, I just haven't paid attention to it, that there certainly is a way to get nicely formatted URLs with Joomla 2.5 and IIS. You will need to look in the docs. You might do a search for IIS hosting, and I think there's an ASAPI rewrite available or something like that. The other comment I was going to make only is applicable if you need to put a security certificate on the site. Security certificates are a bit of a pain to set up at the best of times, but with IIS it can be a little bit more challenging. If you can set it so that if you've got a fixed IP for the site, you're not trying to share the site, then it's much easier, and you can just assign the certificate to the entire site so that HTTPS works everywhere. If you're trying to get a security certificate working off a shared hosting environment, that's possible, but it might work with some web hosts and not others. You will need a dedicated IP, and you might only be able to share a certain folder if you can specify that folder. then specify the root directory where Joomla is stored. I hope that makes sense. There you go. That makes me sound all very clever, I think, but that's because I actually started hosting with Windows, so I know a little bit about it too, even though these days I pretty much don't have a need for that. And to be fair, I appreciate that there are some people that have a real need to do it this way, that they have certain security requirements. That means that they need to host on Windows. Linux people who are unkind would laugh at that statement, I guess. But I know someone here in Sydney, for example, that has a particular requirement to host their government sites on IIS. And so that's why they do that. Okay, that brings this to an end. And so, folks, I'm going to just say once more, thank you for joining me today on this Saturday morning in Australia, or your evening, and I hope that I got to answer your question. If you only registered in the last sort of half an hour before the webinar started, then I probably missed your question. Once again, feel free to go through to the forum if you have a follow-up question. Please consider one of our advanced courses if you feel that that might help you on your Joomla journey. Now that I'm going to stop the recording, that will mean that an hour from now you'll get the email with the links that I mentioned throughout this. And once again, can I ask you when you get off to complete the short survey that will appear? As always, if you have any other feedback, please ideally put it in the forum. You can write to us. I don't hate emails. It's just that we do get a lot of them, and sometimes it gets a little overbearing. And if there's any other particular courses you'd like me to cover, would be really interested to hear that as well. So thank you once again. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening or day if you're on this side of the date line, and I will see you next time.